You will never guess what happened. Someone watched a movie. I know, right? So I was sent a clip by somebody about this movie, and I was like, wait a minute, my sister told me about this. It's like something that is, up my alley. So got it from the library, try before you buy. And that's what I did. This is 2016's Captain Fantastic, starring Viggo Mortensen. This is actually directed by Matt Ross, and Matt Ross played Lewis Carruthers in American Psycho, and it also later on in the story we meet Catherine Hahn's character, who is Viggo Mortensen's like sister-in-law. She's always in like really. I remember her most from like Wanderlust and a couple other things, like very art house movies like this. Um, So basically, in this movie, Viggo Mortensen plays a guy named Ben that has 6 kids, as you can tell from the cover. So his kids, they look a little quirky right there, and that's because they are quirky. They are a homeschooling family, and they're very counterculture, and that's pretty much the entire point of this movie, I guess. So it starts like the very opening scene is the graphic slaughtering of a deer. So they are currently living in the woods in this bus that they have named Steve, and it shows like, of course, my small daughter was sitting right next to me during this opening scene, and she is glued to the TV as it's playing. They're killing a deer with knives, which seems like it would be extremely difficult. So I'm sure that it wasn't the real slaughter of a deer with knives, but it was still there, and I'm like, what the hell am I about to watch? So you see Ben, Viggo Mortensen's character, leading his kids through that. They're training. They are sitting around a campfire at night, like reading books, and you just get the feeling that they are living a life that is very unordinary, to say the least. The more we learn about it, like, and I feel like this is something that I should be able to relate to in some degree, but they're just, they're just, I don't. And I have so many problems with this movie, and I think that that's why I wanted to talk about it. So there's no mom there, and you're like, okay, so what's going on? This guy has 6 kids. They didn't spring it forth from nowhere. So we quickly learn that the mom is having like problems with postpartum depression and just issues. And very early on in the story, he says he sits all of his kids down. He gets a phone call, and he's, dealing with some stuff, and he says, she did it. Mommy killed herself. And I'm like, oh, geez, okay. So the kids react to that in varying degrees. Like some of them just sit quietly with the information, and then like a young teenage boy is probably like 12 or 13. He seems to like rage. They all start crying, whatever. So Ben calls Leslie's dad, and this grandfather character, we he hates Ben. He blames Ben for all of his daughter's problems, and he says, don't come. You're not welcome here at her funeral. He tells the kids, we can't go. Your grandfather doesn't want us there. We have to do what we're told, and it's basically him psyching them up and getting them upset. And then he's kind of like, well, F that, we're going. And the kids, have some uproar of celebration, and then they hop on Steve and they ride into society from the woods. So there's a really interesting montage where it's like beautiful scenery and stuff like that, and then it just increasingly they start showing civilization, strip malls and billboards, and Viggo Mortensen, he's on a PA system like a tour guide. He says in this montage, here we have the embodiment of Calvin Coolidge's statement that the business of America is business. Our democracy is one of the brightest lights of social justice and humankind, and yet most of our fellow citizens engage in frenzied shopping as their primary form of social interaction. So he's casting severe judgment on all of society for their consumerist nature. Capitalist swine. This is the littlest one. They get into society, and she says, "Everyone's so fat, like hippos." Ben's like, "Well, yes, they are, and but you can't really say that. You can think it, but you can't say it because it's not nice. You can't make fun of people." One of the teenage girls chimes in, "Except Christians," and he's like, "Obviously, except Christians." And then in the very next scene, they're still on the bus, and they get pulled over for a broken taillight. The trooper pulls them over and kind of peeks his head in and is like, "Oh, what's all these kids doing not in school?" And so, okay, instead of saying they are on their way to their mom's funeral or they are homeschooled or any one of these totally relevant and truthful explanations, Ben chooses to be as sketchy as possible during that interaction. He doesn't want to answer the question for the trooper, and then he starts looking around, seeing all these books, and then the oldest son, who's like, probably like a senior in high school type age, Bodovin. That's the other thing. I don't know any of these kids' names except for his, basically because they mentioned that they gave their kids unique names and we're the only one of us in the world and whatever. So I don't remember half of them, but the oldest one is Bodovin. And they call him Bo. So he acts like a Christian in this scene. He starts breaking out into song, like singing hymns, and then the officer's like, "Oh, okay, you're religious fanatics," and he F's off out of there. So it's like, not okay to make fun of fat people, okay to make fun of Christians, and then in the very next scene it shows them doing just that. Okay. Ow. It's interesting because a lot of homeschool families are Christian. There's a big crossover. I think it's conducive to a lot of Christian values to homeschool, and Ben is just making it abundantly clear, hey, that's not us. We're doing this for other reasons. And, as it goes on, we learn what those reasons are. There's another scene on Steve. We just see him explaining very adult concepts to these tiny kids. Like, he explains what sex is to like a 6 or 7 year old, probably. And he does so in like the most matter of fact way. He keeps giving, and he won't answer it like dumbed down. He will answer it like the textbook definition, and then she won't understand half of that explanation, so she asks follow-up questions, and then he proceeds to just keep giving more and more textbook definitions until he kind of satisfies whatever questions she has. And then it's just like, you can tell that she still doesn't grasp what he's saying, but like, okay, like you've been educated, like here's, now he doesn't want to lie to her, he wants to give her information. It was just very strange. Also on the bus, the two teenage daughters begin speaking Esperanto to each other, and he says to them, "Hey, no languages on Steve that we can't all speak." I was like, okay, this is pretty nerdy because a lot of people probably won't even know what Esperanto is, but it's an invented language it was created by some Polish doctor, and the entire purpose was to create unity. And, if we break down communication barriers, then everybody will have, it's basically like, oh, we're all going to get along because we all speak the same language with no walls. And very hippie, just out there contrived stuff. It's pretty cool. They stop at a diner on the way into society, and at the diner, they're looking at the menu, and they're like, the kids are like, "What's cola?" He's like, it's poison water." Um, they look at the menu, and he's like, "This is all poison. We can't eat this." So they leave. So the kids are hungry. They go to a grocery store, and they commence Operation Free the Food, and it was it was him, Ben, creating a diversion. He faked a medical incident. He acted like he was having a heart attack, and then all the kids steal food and run out of the store. He acts like they are training for something in the future. He keeps talking about their training, blah, blah, blah. And then they have these operations: Operation Save Mom, Operation Free the Food. And it's like he's acting like they're like a little militia. It's a little odd. Before they make it to their family's house, they celebrate Noam Chomsky Day in the woods. And Ben gifts all of his kids hunting knives, I guess. They're all super excited. Noam Chomsky, so I assume they're like libertarian socialists, and that now we understand why. Okay, they're not Christians, they're just people living outside of, conventional society. So Ben makes it to his family's house, his in laws. He talks about, um, his dead wife, Leslie. They talk about his brother-in-law had a fight with Leslie the last time that they fought. He was like, "Oh yeah, you had a fight with her the last time we were here." And the guy's like, "No, I didn't." And he's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, you did. It was about sugar and blah blah blah." And you know, he doesn't want to be uncomfortable. Like, the last time you talked to this woman, she stormed out because you were giving her a hard time about her lifestyle. Um, he wants to give his kids wine at dinner. He wants to give like tiny little children wine, and he's like, the in-laws are appalled at that. And they're like, they're children. And he's like, kids drink wine in Europe, it's not crack. And then he has to explain crack to his tiny child, and he does that in a matter-of-fact way that absolutely appalls his brother and sister-in-law. They start pressuring him to put his kids in school because he's going to get them killed. They're expressing their concern that his counterculture lifestyle is going to be harmful to his kids. So then he proves a point in, this grand fashion where he asks these kids to explain what the Bill of Rights are. And the one's like, "Oh, I don't know, like something having to do with what, like it was just some stupid explanation." The other kid's like, "I don't know, some government thing." And then he calls down his like 8-year-old daughter, and she like gives this explanation of what the Bill of Rights are. And he kind of scolds her, and he's like, "No, that's just a definition. You're regurgitating information. I want you to give me your opinion, like you describe it." And like she's able to do that, and that's not something that's very easy. It's I don't think that most kids in school could give their own explanation on a lot of topics that they are taught. And that's kind of an advanced idea. So after all the family stuff, there's a scene where Bodevin finds this like trashy girl that he starts to make out with. They spend the whole day together, then they start making out, and then like she's like, "Hey, let's go somewhere." She's gonna bone him, and then her mom like catches them on the way to go find some secluded place, and he does not know what to do. So he gives a monologue, gets down on one knee and proposes to her. And the girl, like his monologue is so, so awkward. And the girl and her mom do not know how to react. Like they just start cracking up. And he is like, What's so funny? Like he has no idea why what he's doing is weird. And the tagline of this movie is he prepared them for everything except the outside world. That's pretty much what's going on there. So that was just awkward. And you could tell, like, it's happened before. There was a scene when they were still out in the wilderness. They went to some little, like a general store to go get goods, and he saw these girls there, and he wanted to talk to them, and he just didn't know how. Like, he was just like, and then the same with this trashy girl. He was trying to talk to her about music, and he's talking about classical music and like Mozart, and she's like, "What?" They were from different worlds. It was very, very. He was a freak, and that's what people say about homeschool kids. Like, "Oh, they're not gonna know how to interact with people." Like, okay. So after this kid has his heart broken, it cuts to Viggo Mortensen's flaccid penis. So, you know, I guess add this to the list of movies with Viggo's dick. So he's on Steve. He, you know, it's a beautiful morning. He has a cup of coffee and he's walking down the bus steps, and there's this little elderly couple walking by, and they're like checking out its hog, and then the little old lady like averts her eyes, and he's like, what, it's just a penis. And it's like, was that even like, did you know that the cameras were rolling, Vigo? Or was that just, you know, is that just really you? It's just a penis. Okay. Yeah. And then I guess the funeral, he was not supposed to be there, but then he gets up and makes a speech during the eulogy about how Leslie, his wife, would not have wanted a funeral. She didn't want to be buried. She wanted to be cremated and then flushed down the toilet because she's so quirky, even in the afterlife. And he basically ruins the funeral with his speech, and then his father-in-law bars him from the burial. So he's on the way with all the kids on Steve. They're going to the burial, and then the kids like stop him, and they're like, Dad, stop, we don't want to lose you too. So the kids are worried that they are going to get taken away from their dad because he's doing, you know, he's going to pull this stunt at the burial, and they don't want to lose their dad. And it's sad because that is, you know, that's an honest concern that a lot of, you know, families that choose to um, live by their own choices and, you know, maybe a bit counterculture, they do worry about those things. They worry about, you know, how is the government going to see my decisions that I'm making for my kid? How is the government going to see that? Are they going to poke around and ask questions and be like, why are you doing this? You know, are they going to take my kids away from me for the way that I'm raising them? And that's just like, it's a valid concern that they have, and he realizes that and he respects that and listens. There's not really a great ending to this movie. You know, I don't really want to, I can't even spoil it because it's like, what is there to spoil? Nothing. There's a lot of stuff that happens between point A and point B. Like, there is the oldest son wants to go to college. His mom helped him apply prior to her death at her own hands. She helped her oldest son apply to every Ivy League school, and he gets accepted into every one of them. So he has his choice of colleges to go to. And when Ben discovers that he had been accepted into all these colleges, he is so pissed. He's like, you did this behind my back. You did this, and, you know, you must have done all this work. And he's like, no, Mom helped me. So he's leaving the counterculture and going into Ivy League school. Upsets his dad, but then he doesn't really end up doing that. He ends up going on some excursion to Namibia because I spun the globe and this is where my finger landed on the map. Like, oh, okay, so you're not going, you know, you're not going to be part of that whole Yale thing. You're going to go to Namibia because you're so counterculture. Now daddy's proud of you again. And then there was Leslie's dad blaming Ben for Leslie's death. And, you know, he said, like, you're the worst thing that happened to this family. Leslie was a lawyer until she met Ben. And it's like, you know, you meet one hippie freak, and, you know, suddenly you're no longer in a law firm. You know, you are now, you're not a partner at your little prestigious law firm. You're now a hippie birthing 6 children and living in the woods, celebrating Noam Chomsky Day. So I can understand why Leslie's dad was not a fan of old Ben. That, and he'd probably seen his penis one too many times. There's a really good scene in the in-laws' house, though, where one of the teenage daughters is sneaking up on this roof trying to rescue her, like, the 13-year-old brother that's, he's really raging against the dad, trying to, like, you know, you killed mom and you didn't save her. And he's living with the grandparents because he is trying to take it out on his dad. And the girl falls and breaks her neck. Basically, she nearly is paralyzed, and it's like a wake up moment for Ben. He's like, oh shit, like, maybe I shouldn't be having my kids. There's a moment where this 13-year-old kid is climbing, like, they're climbing a mountain, like a rock face. They're rock climbing, And he falls, and you know, his whatever his restraint system is, it saves him, but now he like broke his arm, and Vigo's like, no one's coming to save you, you gotta save yourself. It's like, okay, we get it, this is like you're trying to teach him a lesson, but also it's like a teenager that really had, he broke his arm, you didn't get him medical attention, you bandaged it up after he had to climb himself up to the top of this mountain. So it's like, you might want to stop being so hardcore there, dad. So I think he realizes that, and then at the end it's like, oh no, dad, we're all accepting of your weird counterculture ways. So they all exhume their mommy's corpse, and then they make a real hippie funeral pyre. They burn her corpse like some Viking. He has this quote, and he says, and I had to look it up, I'm like, is this some like stupid quote from poetry or something? And it's not, it's just something that they wrote for this movie. And he says, my face is mine, my hands are mine, my mouth is mine, but I'm not, I'm yours. And I'm like, well, that's not very good. So it's just like, it was supposed to be some introspective thing. I don't know, it didn't do it for me. But he burns his wife's corpse, and all the kids start playing Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses. They break out in some hippie music thing, and it was just absolutely terrible. I nearly didn't get to the end of the movie because I couldn't make it through that song. I was like, just make this stop. Make this stop. I don't like hippie music. I certainly don't like hippie music when they're playing a rendition of Guns N' Roses. It was absolutely excruciating to experience. And then they take the ashes and they flush them down the toilet at the airport while Brother's on his way to Namibia or wherever the fuck he's going. So that is the movie. Now, I told you I have problems with it. What does this say? Okay, so after the brother goes to Namibia, then you can't just leave it there, right? With the mommy being flushed into the sewer system. Then it cuts to them in a house, and it's like this beautiful homestead, you know, tons of a garden and whatever, and oh, it looks just like idyllic. And hurry up, kids, bus is coming in 15 minutes. The kids are going to school. So what does this say? This says that this lifestyle is not feasible. Just send your kids to school. You're going to get them killed. Send them to school. That's the overarching theme of this movie. I don't understand. I don't understand why so many homeschooling families look up to this movie. They really do. I mean, overall, it was like, if you're into quirky art house movies, I would suggest it. It's good for that genre. But I would say if you're a weirdo counterculture libertarian socialist homeschooler, this is about you. You should probably watch it. You will probably admire and look up to what they're doing. Um, but by that same right, if you're able to think for yourself and like, you know, take it a step further from, I like what this guy's doing, and I like that there's a movie acknowledging this lifestyle. It's not just acknowledging it, it's saying it's not good. You know, he didn't prepare them for the outside world. This lifestyle is bad. Don't be like this guy. So, that's why, like, I was just like, I don't know. He was great in it. Viggo Mortensen was great in it. You know, the kids were great. I thought that I don't know who these kids are or if they're in other stuff, but they were good actors. So there's a lot about this movie that you can enjoy, but from a counterculture hippie wannabe, it's kind of an insult. So, and that's what my sister told me. She bought this and she was like, it kind of has like liberal undertones, and I'm like, well, you know, basically, I'm no Christian, but it's slapping Christianity in the face. It's kind of strange considering that's what, that goes hand in hand with homeschooling. Homeschooling is the number one most it's gaining popularity as a way to educate kids in America. So huge rise in homeschooling. I don't know if people are watching this as a result, but if you are, I don't know if that's what you're up to. Let me know what you think of this, because from someone that is aligned with those things, I was just kind of turned off by it, to be quite honest. Very glad that I didn't buy this thing. Very glad that I borrowed it from the library. So, in homeschooling fashion, homeschooling families work closely with their libraries for resources and such. So, maybe patronize your local library. And if anything from this review, if it didn't inspire you to watch a movie with Viggo Mortensen's flaccid penis, maybe it will inspire you to go down to your old abandoned local library and borrow a couple books and movies, media. So I'm done. I will try to make more videos in the future. Appreciate you watching this, I guess. Really curious if anybody else has seen that, because I was just like, should have been something I knew about long ago, but here we are, and I don't know, I guess bye.